So welcome to the June 8th, 2023 Inspiring Author Conversations. I'm Kathy Davis, Davis Creative Publishing. Today we'll be speaking with Cheryl Bonini Ellis about the 6 pillars of high performance. Before we start and I officially introduce Cheryl, I do want to remind everybody to hit your mute button if you've not already.
No matter how long you've been on your current plan, it's always a good practice.
They're all, let's see, Cheryl, you'll need to unmute yourself here in a minute. And find your chat button down at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions as we're going along, please type those into the chat box and I'll make sure we get those answered. Our hope is to end the call today around noon or shortly thereafter. Sometimes we go to 12:15. There's a lot of questions. We'll go ahead and go to the half hour for those of you on different coasts today. Help me welcome Cheryl Bonini Ellis. Cheryl is the author of Becoming Deliberate, Changing the Game of Leadership from the Inside Out. Cheryl was also an author in, what was it, Bright Spots, an anthology which would have been 2021, I think. That's right, yeah, 2021 of November. Cheryl is a certified high-performance coach, a senior faculty member of the Leadership Development Institute at Eckerd College, and a certified facilitator for 5 behaviors of a cohesive team: everything DISC, product conflict, and Agile EQ. So welcome, Cheryl. Cheryl and I know each other through another sales group that a colleague of ours runs monthly. And in addition to being in you were also in Ready, Connect, Grow in January.
I was.
Awesome. So what is this about the 6 pillars, and where do I start if I want to up my performance?
Yeah, so let's just talk about this a little bit. Now, when I talk about the 6 pillars of high performance, I think the question I'm trying to answer is, what is it that the most high performing, most successful, most fulfilled people do differently? And so, and it all starts with, let me just make sure I can move this. Here we go. 6 pillars. It all starts, first of all, with understanding the things that hold people back. And I think they're things you pretty much expect, but I like to call out the top 3, which are fear, frustration, and fatigue. And what we find is that people tend to get stuck when they are super tired and overwhelmed, or they have fear that is preventing them from moving forward for some reason. It could be any number of fears, or else they're just, really frustrated with how things are working or not working for them. And so it's helpful to recognize those things in the context of what we're going to talk about. So I just like to call that out before I even get into the 6 pillars. And I also like to define high performance because I think it means something different to different people. So this definition is actually based on a huge study done by the High Performance Institute. I think it's the largest study of its kind, both qualitative and quantitative, that helped to define what is it that is different about high performers. How did they get that way? And so the definition that we use in this context is that high performance is succeeding beyond standard norms consistently over the long term while maintaining well-being and positive relationships. And it's very deliberately stated in this 3 ways, because one of the things that happens is most of us can succeed momentarily or for the short term. But when we work with high performers, one of the things that separates them is that they're very consistent over the long term. In fact, they're always recognizing there's another level, and I'm constantly trying to achieve that next level of performance or that next level of consistency. And very importantly, doing this while I maintain my own well-being, my own health, personal health, and also good relationships with people that are important to me, whether those are work relationships or personal relationships. Because we all know people who have, succeeded in a big way, but they're miserable, or they've succeeded in a big way at the cost of their health, or they've succeeded in a big way at the cost of their relationships with their spouse or with their kids. So when we talk about high performance in this context, we want to make the point that it is possible to maintain that level of consistent high performance over the long run while maintaining health and well-being and while maintaining positive relationships. So it's a very definite, definition. So these are the 6 pillars, and I'm going to talk about each of them a little bit in turn because these words mean different things to different people. But let me start out with psychology, which is one of the foundations. And when I talk about psychology, high performance is all about mastering these 6 things. And psychology is all about the way we think. It's our view of the world. It's how we think about the world. It's how we show up. Physiology is about our level of, I'll call it energy, for lack of a better word. How energetic are you? How well are you able to sustain energy over time? How well are you able to develop or generate energy when you need it? And I'm not just talking about physical energy. I'm talking about mental, emotional, and spiritual energy as well. And if you're trying to perform at a high level and you have high goals and aspirations, having the physical stamina to keep with it is really important. So that's what the physiology is all about. Productivity is that ability to focus on the right things in the right way at the right time and to avoid getting distracted. And, distractions are something that we all experience, right? I mean, it's anything from getting sucked into email to getting sucked into social media or internet exploring, all kinds of things that distract us from the work at hand or the thing we're trying to focus on or the goal we're trying to achieve. And in this frame, we really teach some productivity tools that may be a little different than most people think about. I think some of them are a little bit counterintuitive, if you will, but that's what productivity is about, focusing on the right things. And then the people piece is all about what level of influence you can bring to bear to get people to work with you, to buy from you, to support your cause, if you will. I'm just trying to think of different ways that this comes up, but it's all about having those level of people skills that allow you to create levels of influence within your community. And then presence is pretty much what it sounds like. It's that ability and willingness to be here now. And, whether it's being present with people, I mean, I think there's nothing more disconcerting than having a conversation with somebody and, they're looking around the room or they're looking down at their device and they're really not paying attention. And to me, when you do that, you're conveying to someone that they're really not that important or what they're saying is really not that interesting. And so presence actually takes practice in today's world, especially when we're distracted by all these devices and everything else that's going on around us. So learning how to really be present with, whether it's with your team members or with your family, practicing presence is important. And then finally, purpose, which I think, recognizing that you have a purpose, I'm wondering sometimes what that purpose is, but also being able to focus on things that are purposeful and meaningful for you. And when we talk about purpose in this context, I often think about people kind of wait for purpose to land on them. Like at some point in my life, my purpose in life is going to be revealed to me. And I think I look at it a little bit differently. I think that you have to pursue your purpose. And sometimes that's a short-term pursuit. Like my purpose right now might be just focused on today or this week or this month or this year. Or maybe my purpose is longer term and I'm trying to fulfill that over time. All of those count. And the ability to really focus on your purpose is what that is about. So I'm just going to pause, Kathy, to see if you have any questions about what I've covered so far about the pillars and see what questions I can answer about that.
I know one of the questions I had was that I was thinking about as you were talking, is there, or do you offer a path for someone? Because I've heard that quite a bit in working with authors, how, I'm still looking for, why I'm here on this planet, or what my mission is in this life. And, if it's God-given, then can you give it to me again so that I can see it this time and I'll be more aware of it? Is there a path that someone can follow in order to figure that out?
I think it's it's different for each person. I think a lot of times we kind of fool ourselves into thinking we have a singular purpose in life. And I do think some people have that. They know it early on and they are dedicated to it and they're consistent about it and they're very focused on fulfilling that purpose. I think for other people, it's a bit of a lifelong journey. I fall into the second category, so I can relate more to that. I came to appreciate at a point in time that my purpose in life would evolve over time, that it would have some ups and downs. So sometimes it would be very short-term focused, other times it would be longer-term focused. And I think it has a lot to do with the value that I can add into the communities that I serve, whether those are people that I'm teaching or whether, in writing or programs that I run. But in the program that this is all based on, my high performance coaching program, there is a couple of different sessions that we do on purpose that takes people through a self-reflection process that will help clarify that. So there is a path. I think it's very different for different people, but I think the kinds of questions that we ask in this program help people gain some clarity around that.
Awesome.
So I do think there's a way to get to it.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else have a question while we're taking a short little pause? Feel free to hop in.
I have a little question. I missed the explanation of psychology.
Okay. So psychology is essentially how you think. It has to do with your view of the world, if you will. One of the questions I ask people here to bring some clarity to this is, are you living your truth? In other words, do you know why you're here? And are your behaviors and actions and priorities consistent with that? That's all part of your psychology. But really, what we dig into here is controlling your thoughts so that your thoughts don't control you, and just being more deliberate about that. Does that help?
Okay, so yeah, focusing.
Yeah, it's about focusing. It's about understanding how your thoughts either serve you or don't. We all have that little voice that goes on in our head sometimes that seems almost uncontrollable, but actually we can control it if we can tune into it and be aware of a lot of times what is negative thinking, especially about ourselves. I like to think of this as, what do you say about yourself to yourself when you're by yourself? And can you be more deliberate about helping that to align with the things that you're trying to accomplish?
So having a vision.
Yeah, having a vision and being able to stay true to that vision. Also having values and staying true to those values, just recognizing what those are. And then when you start to have that inside conversation, is turning that around when it starts to be negative. I mean, a lot of times I think when I work with people on this, there's a voice inside your head. When you tune into it, a lot of times it's a negative voice. It's a critical voice. It's telling you, you screwed up. Oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you did that wrong. Oh, you did, you should be better. And I say, if you can learn to tune into that voice and turn it around and just be more positive toward yourself and institute a little more self-care, you can help your overall psychology that way.
It also sounds like there's some mindset principles in there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It is about mindset. It's a lot about mindset, how you think. And I actually think that almost anything you do, if you start with mindset, like, how am I thinking about this and how should I think about this? It helps you it helps you to get started in the direction you want to go. Just giving yourself some time to think about it before you proceed. And that's something that's a learned behavior for me, because I'm a type of person that just goes full steam ahead most of the time. And so this was, for me, was about learning to be more deliberate and thoughtful before I took action. So that's just another.
Right, yeah, and I know I ask myself, if it's something to stumble over, I usually say, okay, how can I turn this around? And it's taken me many years to get to where that's an automatic question in my head. It's like, okay, this may not be a happy thing that just occurred, but how can I turn it around? And yeah, keep moving from
Right.
that perspective.
Yeah, and it all has to do with the way that you look at something. So, we always have a choice, when you're presented with something that happens to you, which also happens for you. If you stop and think about what lesson is there here for me, because there's almost always some type of a learning opportunity or some type of message, something that you need to know in order to move forward productively. So sometimes the most difficult circumstances are our biggest teachers, right? Those challenges. I mean, just think about everything we learned about ourselves and others during the pandemic. It was, it was horrible to go through. I mean, it was not something any of us would choose, but we all went through it differently. Everybody went through it together, but differently and separately. And so some people responded and adapted quickly. Other people really had a hard time. So all of that lends itself to your psychology, right?
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Other questions or comments about that? I think one of the things about, the people piece is just wondering to yourself and asking yourself if you have developed the kinds of people skills that you need in order to get done what you need to do. So sometimes those are skills of influence, like how can I influence other people to join me in my cause, or to support my cause, or to join my team, or to accomplish this goal with me. So asking yourself, what are the people skills I need, and how can I develop better people skills in the way that I interact with other people. And I also think, when I think of this, I think of being a role model for other people. And that speaks to both it speaks to presence, it speaks to purpose, and it also speaks to people. When you're trying to influence other people, being mindfully aware of what your behavior is like, what your words are like, and what kind of example are you setting. Other thoughts before I go next? I mean, often one of the things I ask myself and ask others to ask themselves is, if there's an area there that doesn't make sense to you, or you're not really happy with where you are, what would happen if you really focused on it? So what, for example, could happen for you if you really focused on your psychology, your mindset, the way you think, the way you show up, if you're more deliberate about that? So, and by extension, I say, what impact would it have on the people around you? Because I have a belief that anything you do to improve yourself or your outlook has a direct impact on all the people around you. They benefit from that as well. So whenever you invest in yourself by learning something new, or just learning how to control behavior or thought process, it has a direct impact on other people in your circle. You influence just by showing up, right?
It's the ripples we create just by walking through a room. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I do a lot with teaching leaders and teaching leadership to leaders. In fact, this week I'm at Eckerd College doing a week-long leadership development program. I took a break to join you all. And, one of the things we ask people to think about is how are they showing up as a leader in the world? And what are they doing? What kind of behavior and thought process are they role modeling for the people that look up to them or look to them for leadership? And just learning to be more deliberate about that. And we spend, quite a bit of time on helping people understand that, and understand the impact they're having on other people, and also understand some of the gaps sometimes between what they intend and what actually happens. So a lot of times we do something that we don't anticipate the impact of it, and yet it has an impact on somebody that we didn't want. So we do spend time on that. So really focusing on behaviors and thoughts in those areas can make a huge difference, not just to you, but to the people around you. So this is also, I say, think beyond yourself. How might improvement in any of these areas help you, but also your family, your team, your career, or your mission, and just your overall life goals. I also want to talk about, I promised to talk about the number one habit of high performance. So in the research that was done that I mentioned with the High Performance Institute, and it's a huge qualitative and quantitative research that was done just a few years ago now. And what it did was it looked at, habits of high performers. And it looked at a lot of different habits that people had. And it distilled them down to 6 habits that have the biggest impact on performance. And I just want to mainly talk about the number one habit, because I think it all starts with this habit. And when I take people through the high performance coaching program that I offer, I start with this and I keep going back to it. And it's about seeking clarity. So I say that the number one habit of high performance is to seek clarity. And what do I mean by that? Anytime you can ask yourself, what is it that I want? It's surprising to me how many times I ask people that question and they don't know the answer to it, because they really haven't stopped to think about it. So they might be complaining about somebody or something that's going on in their life. And I'll say, what would you like to see happen? What is it that you want? And they're so busy complaining that they haven't stopped to think about what is the outcome or the result that they're really looking for. And so when you can start with that, when you can get clarity about what it is you want, what's the goal, what's the result you're looking for, what's the outcome you want, everything else kind of falls into place from there. Because now you can, to your point earlier, Kathy, now you can see more of a path. So for example, you wanted to seek clarity about your purpose. I would start to ask questions around, what is it that I want? What's important to me? Not only what is it that I want, but why do I want it? Why is it important to me? And maybe what do I not want? Sometimes it's the opposite that leads you to getting the clarity. Like, okay, I don't really know what I want, but I know what I don't want. And I'm trying to set up my business. Here's what I want it to look like. Here's what I don't want it to look like. Any type of thing that you undertake, if you start to gain some clarity around what it is that you want and why it is that you want it, the path to it becomes a lot clearer. You could say, okay, so at least I can see maybe the first step I have to take. Maybe I can't see beyond that, but once I take that first step, maybe I can see the next step I have to take. So I say seeking clarity is probably not only the number one habit of high performance for me, but it's the thing I always go back to. So even if I'm talking about psychology or energy or productivity or influence, I always go back to this question of, okay, let's get clear on what it is you're looking for here. What do you want to have happen? What don't you want? Why do you want it? So just asking simple questions like that sometimes can really be a game changer. So I call that the number one habit of high performance. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I know we have some high performers on the call. And it made a lot of sense to me from a clarity perspective, because I think it does fall back into that, who am I? Why am I here? And I think, I forget who that original quote was. Admiral Stockdale. He was Ross Perot's running mate, how many ever decades ago, for those of us old enough to remember that election. But one of his quotes was, who am I and why am I here? And I think that's a big thing, especially people in business. What I've seen, and I came out of corporate at Boatman's Bank of America was once the leader gains clarity, it definitely creates that ripple effect on the team.
Mhm.
And you work a lot with leaders and teams, as I recall.
Yes. So you're absolutely right. You know, the leader sets the direction for the team, and it has to have really a clear vision in order to set that direction. You know, what is it that we ultimately want to achieve? Why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? Answering those questions makes it easier then to align people around a set of goals or actions that they need to take.
Mhm.
So, and that in turn leads to commitment. So those are some outcomes of effective leadership that happen when you have clarity, because the clarity allows you to set direction, communicate that direction to people, and get people excited about it. And so this certainly works real well in business, but any type of I say any type of leadership position requires you to set some sense of direction for people. We'll have to kind of know where we're going.
Even
They want
families.
clarity on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
Because otherwise they don't know what to do when they show up. If they don't know where we're headed or what we're trying to achieve, they don't know what to do when they show up. So I just keep going back to clarity, because I think whenever you're in the mud, whenever you're stuck, when you're feeling even fearful, is getting clarity. Like even just a little piece of clarity can really help move the needle for you.
Now, from your experience, is there a time frame? I mean, and I'm sure it's different for everybody, but is there a typical time frame that once somebody gains clarity, that it allows them more easily to move into that high performing mode?
I mean, sometimes it can be instantaneous, but I also, on the flip side, I say it's a lifelong pursuit. Because to me, I mean, I've been working on this. I've been a certified high performance coach for just about 10 years, but I've been working on other elements of this for even longer than that, and certainly back in my corporate life. Um, I think there's always another level. I mean, to me, there's always a growth opportunity. There's always a learning opportunity. I think about continuous improvement. I'm always asking myself, okay, what's next? Like I've focused on this for a while. What's next? And with that, my my business has evolved over time. I mean, I'm focused on different things now than when I started my business. And
Mhm.
it's just this habit of constantly seeking clarity about what feeds me. What do I love doing? What do I not want to do? And so I've gotten my work has gotten narrower and narrower in that time, because I've gained more and more clarity about, yeah, I can do this, but I really don't love it.
Mhm.
This I love. This feeds me. This boosts my spirit. This I can have energy about this all day long. I mean, the course I teach right now it's 5 days. It's very intense, and it takes a lot of energy. And if I didn't love it, I couldn't generate the energy I need to do it, because it's a lot. You
And
know,
what would
it's
you say is the biggest takeaway when someone finishes your course, and what's their biggest message that they walk away with?
Yeah, I think clarity is one of the biggest takeaways. It's where I start, and it's in a way where I end, because I think people end up with a lot more clarity around not only the habits that are really important to performing at a high level, but also those 6 things I talked about mastering. So they have more clarity on what those represent for me, or for each person,
Mhm.
because it's different for everybody. One of the things I love about this work is it essentially works for everybody. Clients in the high performance space are athletes, sometimes elite athletes. They are executives and leaders. They are business owners. They are moms. A lot of times we have moms that go through this program because they want to be a better mom. I mean, anybody who wants to be better at something and has a commitment to that can benefit by learning about high performance and practicing the habits and developing the habits, and developing the mastery that is part of it. So you can tell I love
Terrific.
the work I
Yeah.
do. It's really, I just have personally gained so much from this work that I'm always excited to share it with other people
Mhm.
because I've benefited so much myself.
Terrific.
What other questions or comments do you have?
So one of the questions that I would have is once we gain clarity, um, what's our next step in that path?
Well, it depends. It depends what the path is, and it depends where you're headed, and it depends where you're going. But a couple things that that typically get included in that is one of the things I want to measure is whether or not you have the energy to pursue the path, to pursue the goal, to accomplish the things that you need to accomplish. And so we typically look a lot at not only physical energy, but all the elements that go into physical energy, but how mental and emotional and spiritual energy interact with physical energy. We all know that if we're mentally exhausted, we're also kind of physically exhausted. It's really hard to push yourself through when your brain is just tired.
Yeah.
So we look at all the different things that contribute to the ability to generate energy when you need it. So it's things like your, your diet. It's things like hydration. It's things like sleep. Sleep is a big one. It's things like making sure that you have social connections and social interactions with people. So we look at all the different elements that contribute to maintaining your energy or building your energy, but also building your resilience, because performing at a high level over the long run, it takes energy. It
I was
takes.
curious that you mentioned your connections, because there was a study, and I forget which university recently, that talked about the two things that people missed most because of the pandemic were was a sense of hope and community.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes down to, I think a lot of what happened in the pandemic, however it affected each of us personally, those are the two priorities and values that came out as the highest ranking.
I think it's really interesting because, first of all, the sense of hope speaks to your psychology, directly to your psychology. How you think about things, how you interpret things that happen. So again, with the pandemic, there were people that said, we will get through this. They were hopeful. We'll figure it out. We'll adapt, and we'll survive, and we will prevail. And then there are other people that just hunkered down, and they're still hunkered down because they can't get past it. Speaks to your psychology for sure, and your sense of hope. I think as far as community, it's interesting to me because I think people got some real clarity during the pandemic about their need for community or not, their need to interact with other people or not. I think for some people, they figured out that, you know what, I don't really need to interact so much with other people. I'm happier staying at home, keeping within my small circle of friends or family, and I don't need much more than that. And then there are the other people, and these are probably extremes. On the other end of the extreme were people that were just so unhappy not having that interaction with their coworkers in the workplace, and they just couldn't wait to get back to work and have that interaction. And I think a lot of people got more clarity on what was important to them in that regard over that time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how something like that will bring clarity. When we go through something that's a challenge. I mean, just think about what happens to you. There's a great quote, and I'll mess it up if I try to do it directly, but the gist of it is that most people have multiple goals, but if you don't have your health, you have one goal, and your focus becomes gaining your health. And so your perspective shifts in that situation. So again, moment of clarity, I need to focus on my health right now because nothing else matters unless I get healthy again.
Right. Those values came out. So before we wrap up today, is it possible for us to hear the other 5 habits? Or how many
Sure.
habits are there?
Well, there's 6 that have come from the study.
Mhm.
And I think there are more than that that are associated with high performance, but these are the ones that are most, they correlate highest with high performance. And,
Mhm.
I like to say it's not a lot of times what people think, because what they think is it has to do with experience or age or, some other gender. I mean, it could be a whole bunch of things that we think, people who are this are more likely to be high performance. The reality is it's neutral. None of that stuff matters. What matters is doing the habits and doing them consistently. So that first one is to seek clarity. The second one is to generate energy. And we talked a little bit about that. The third one is to raise necessity. And what I mean by that is to have a higher level of ambition for yourself. Make it non-negotiable to get to another level, to perform at a higher level, to achieve more. And so you raise your level of necessity. You focus on getting to another level. Those are kind of the individual ones. And then there's ones that are more interactive with other people. One of them is increasing your productivity. And with that are a whole lot of things that seem often counterproductive to people about gaining more productivity. I think a lot of people associate that with time management. This really goes beyond that to, eliminating or reducing distractions, but also getting real clarity on what you're focused on, and so you can be productive on the right things. Next one is developing influence. And influence is using those people skills to get people on board with what you're trying to accomplish. And then demonstrating courage. And courage is a big one. Courage speaks to your confidence level. Sometimes courage is about speaking up, and sometimes it's about shutting up. It just really depends. I spend a lot of time with leaders about courage because I think leadership takes great courage. But we think of high performers as people who demonstrate courage. They're fearful and they move forward anyway. They take steps. They do things that are uncomfortable. So those are the 6.
Are there any other questions here for Cheryl today? I find it all very fascinating. If you've worked in any kind of group environment, you can see how this plays out and creates that momentum and that ripple factor for, as one person gains clarity, how that can ripple out and help everyone else to find the same.
I think that's really true, that there's a big ripple effect. And if you think about the number of people that you interact with on a regular basis, and everybody pays attention to what other people are focusing on and what they're doing and what they're saying, and they use that as cues for what's the right way to be, the right things to say, the right things to do.
So if you were to leave us with some parting words of wisdom to motivate us to take that next step, what might that be?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is think for your own self and your own life about what's most important to you going forward, and how are you going to achieve that, and recognize where there's another level for you. So if you're performing at a really high level today, I would challenge you to think about what's next. And I think part of the process of high performance has to do with focusing on what's next, not being satisfied with where you are, because that you should be, but at the same time, just expanding yourself and challenging yourself to go to another level. That's what I challenge everybody to do.
Yeah. I love that. What's the next best step? Yeah, terrific. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here today. And Cheryl, thank you so much. I've enjoyed talking with you and picking your brain on this. The next Lunch and Learn will be on July 22nd. That seems quite ways away, but we are moving back to our once a month format between now and the end of the year. And we will be actually on July 22nd, same time, 11:30 Central. We'll be having an open call for questions about publishing. So I'll be on the call. I'll pull in at least one of our writing coach editors and pull in one of our designers, and we'll be here to answer whatever questions come up. So I want to thank everybody again for being here today, and hopefully I'll see you July 2nd. Cheryl, thank you so much for being July 22nd. Sorry about that. Cheryl, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you to all of our guests. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next month.
Thanks so much, Kathy.
Uh-huh.
Enjoyed myself. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.